Yes, I think the take-home message here, if you're a landowner, particularly in the southern coastal plain, or in Florida, eastern, southern Georgia, all the way up through the Carolinas, fire is a really important tool for you. And if you own acreage and you want to use fire to manage nutrition, there are a couple of things that you can do to maximize that practice. One, sunlight is absolutely critical. We need enough sunlight coming into the forest to reach the forest floor so that we can realize that flush in vegetation. Generally, the minimum number of sunlight, like if you look up, you should be getting at least 20%, but that's like bare minimum. We're really looking at having 40% sunlight or even more in some contexts. That sunlight is really important because it manages or it stimulates the response to fire. So if light is limiting, you will not realize the response to fire that you would get otherwise. So if we release light, then we can use fire cleverly to manage this resource pulse and provide high quality nutrition throughout the year. So there are a couple of things you need to be thinking about. One, it's better not to burn all at the same time. And most people immediately think, okay, I'll break up the property. Let's say I'm going to do on a 2 or 3 year rotation. I'll burn some each year, right? Most people think of it intuitively that way, and that's good. We need to break up the burning to have some burning occurring each year. But also, you can spread it out and better utilize the burn window. We get a lot of burn days, especially in the deep south. We get a lot of burn days throughout the year, and we do not use those burn days in some parts of the year, at least across the landscape. So if you take that same situation and we're spreading some of our burn units so that they're offset in years, but then also taking those within a year and burning them at different times of the year, then we're starting to bridge the gap where we have high quality resource pulse nutrition from that fire that is readily available and accessible to deer throughout their year. And in particular, it's really important such that some of that is timed so this resource pulse that occurs a month or two after the fire co-occurs with peak lactation and peak antler growth. That is the bottleneck on the productivity of deer populations, especially in the south. So if you can think about how you can integrate fire into your management approach such that it occurs just before those key processes, we can really effectively increase the available nutrition with this tool for relatively cheap. So that's a key aspect. I hesitate to tell you what month that is, and I think Florida is a really good example of why. So we have deer breeding in literally 10 months out of the 12 somewhere in the state. Right? So there are deer that are breeding in April, and there are deer breeding in October and January. And what that leads to is, depending on where you're at in Florida in particular, what month you need to burn in so that it coincides with lactation could be at any time of the year, depending on where you're at. So that's something to take into context when you're trying to tailor a fire regime to your land. Think about what window of time is really important to the deer, i.e. when they are lactating and when they're growing antlers, and then trying to coincide your management practices so that you can take advantage of that resource pulse during that critical time, whether it's in June or September or February. In some cases, that could vary quite widely within Florida, but you can apply that to your context if you know when the breeding behavior is happening, and then that peak breeding about 200 days later, that's when peak lactation and generally peak antler growth are going to occur. So think about that chronology on your property and then start to try to tailor your management practices to take advantage of things like this resource pulse with fire so that they maximize that practice for nutrition for deer.